say starting a business is not for everyone. You know, so generally, starting a business, I'd say number one is have a high pain threshold. That's there's a friend of mine who's got a good saying, which is that starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. Okay, that's generally what happens, because when you first start a company, there's lots of optimism and things are great, and then so happiness at first is high. Then you encounter all sorts of issues, and happiness will steadily decline, and then you'll go through a whole world of hurt. And then eventually, if you succeed, and in most cases you will not succeed, and Tesla almost didn't succeed, came very close to failure. Then if you succeed, then after a long time, you will finally get back to happiness. If you study engineering and you figure out how to design new things, then it's relatively easy to start a company. You just need to get a few like-minded people with you, and then focus on creating a prototype, a compelling prototype, as soon as possible. And then, there's a strong venture capital industry in this country that will give you funding to take things to the next level, and that's all there is to it. And you might, if you try it a few times, you may or may not succeed. But I think sometimes people fear starting a company too much. You have to say, really, what's the worst that could go wrong? You're not going to starve to death. You're not going to die of exposure. What's the worst that could go wrong? I think this is sort of general, advice I'd give to people starting companies, to entrepreneurs in general, is really focus on making a product that your customers love. It's so rare that you can buy a product and you love the product when you bought it. There are very few things that fit into that category. And if you can come up with something like that, your business will be successful for sure. As long as people stay super focused on creating an absolute best product or service that really delights their end customer, if they stay focused on that, then if you get it such that your customers want you to succeed, then you probably will.
Right. You have to focus on the customer and delivering for them.
Yeah. Make sure if your customers love you, your odds of success are dramatically higher.
Yeah.
You mentioned how you want to make this affordable for the for the average consumer, but you also had to cancel the 40 kilowatt battery-powered Model S because you didn't see as much demand on that lower end as you saw in the higher end. So how do you reconcile the two?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because we had an intense debate at Tesla about the 40 kilowatt-hour car, and we test drove some initial units, and it wasn't a good product. And one of the commitments I made at Tesla is that we will never produce a bad product, just never. I don't care, even if we could make money on it, on a bad product, we will just not do it. And I just don't think the 40 kilowatt hour was a good product. What you want to do is try to have one customer generate, like 2 customers.
Yeah.
Okay, or something like that, maybe 3 customers ideally. And then you want that to happen really fast. You could probably model it just like bacteria growth in a Petri dish, and it'll just it'll expand very quickly until it hits the sides of the Petri dish. Just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100-hour weeks every week. If other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve. If you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. It's kind of mentally easier to reason by analogy rather than from first principles. But by first principles is kind of a physics way of looking at the world. And what that really means is you kind of boil things down to the most fundamental truths and say, okay, what are we sure is true, or as sure as possible is true? And then reason up from there. Mm-hmm. That takes a lot more mental energy.
Give me an example of that. Like, what's one thing that you've done that on that you feel has worked for you?
Sure. So somebody could say, in fact people do, that battery packs are really expensive and that's just the way they'll always be, because that's the way they've been in the past. You're like, well, no, that's pretty dumb, because if you applied that reasoning to anything new, then you wouldn't be able to ever get to that new thing.
Right.
It's like you can't say, horses, nobody wants a car because horses are great and we're used to them and they can eat grass and there's lots of grass all over the place, and there's no gasoline that people can buy, so people are never going to get cars.
Right.
People did say that. And for batteries, they would say, it's going to cost. Historically, it's cost $600 per kilowatt hour, and so it's not going to be much better than that in the future. And you say, no, okay, well, what are the batteries made of? So first principles would be to say, okay, what are the material constituents of the batteries? Mm-hmm. What is the spot market value of the material constituents? So you can say, okay, it's got cobalt, nickel, aluminum, carbon, and some polymers for separation, and a steel can. So break that down on a material basis and say, okay, if we bought that on the London Metal Exchange, what would each of those things cost? Like, it's like $80 per kilowatt hour. Mm-hmm. So clearly, you just need to think of clever ways to take those materials and combine them into the shape of a battery cell, and you can have batteries that are much, much cheaper than anyone realizes. I'd say focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. So, for example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. I think that's the way to go. So for any given company, just can keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts. Entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. So a lot of times, entrepreneur will come up with something which is only slightly better. And it can't just be slightly better. It's got to be a lot better. Constantly seek criticism. Yeah. A well thought out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold. And you should seek that from everyone you can, but particularly your friends. Usually your friends know what's wrong, but they don't want to tell you because they don't want to hurt you.
So lift you up, sort of.
Yeah. So they'll say, I want to encourage my friend, so I'm not going to tell him what I think is wrong with this product.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean your friends are right, but very often they are right. and you at least want to listen very carefully to what they say. And to everyone, if you're looking for, basically, you should take the approach that you're wrong. That you, the entrepreneur, are wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong.
An obsessive nature with respect to the quality of the product is very important. So, being obsessive compulsive is a good thing in this context. Whatever area that you get into, given that even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. I'd say and also if you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to, and if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think.